Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're basically digital detectives. We're going to piece together this really fascinating mystery from three totally different clues: a philosophical paper, a private code review, and public domain records. Let's dive in.
All right, so our first clue comes from this wild quote in an anonymous white paper. It says, "The mempool is not merely memory, but meaningful state." Now, what does that even mean? Well, the author is basically saying we've been looking at blockchain all wrong. We're so focused on the final confirmed transactions, but we're totally missing the real story that's happening just under the hood.
So, the paper wants us to think about the blockchain's mempool in a whole new way. Technically, it's just this chaotic waiting room, right? It's where all the transactions are just hanging out, waiting to get confirmed. But the author's like, hold on, what if it's more than that? They're suggesting it's a place that's actually filled with intent, with meaning, almost like a subconscious for the entire internet. Kind of trippy, right?
Okay, so this idea of a digital subconscious, how would that even work? It sounds cool, but is it just a metaphor? Well, no. The author actually goes a step further and builds this whole emotional framework around how blockchain actually operates.
Check this out. The white paper lays out this whole framework, mapping super technical stuff to actual human emotions. So, sending a transaction, that's seen as an act of vulnerability. You're putting something out there, just hoping it gets where it needs to go. And that time you're waiting, biting your nails, maybe paying a higher gas fee, that's anxiety or anticipation. Getting your transaction included in a block, that's validation, pure and simple. Even something like a chain fork, where the network gets confused for a second, is framed as doubt or regret. It's a totally different way of looking at what's happening on the network.
So where does this lead? To a new concept the author calls the relational mempool. The big idea here is that the mempool isn't just a random pile of data. No way. It's actually this dynamic web of relationships, where every single transaction that's waiting is connected to others through some kind of shared intent or context.
And that brings us to the next logical step, right? If the mempool has feelings, then the gas you pay isn't just about money. The paper introduces this idea of emotional gas. It's the non-financial drive behind a transaction, things like urgency, conviction, trust. It's the why you're doing something, and that's just as important as the what.
It's a really cool, almost poetic idea. But at the end of the day, we're talking about technology. So the big question is, how on earth do you build a system based on something as abstract as vulnerability or trust? How do you turn all this philosophy into actual working code? Well, the answer to that might just be in our second clue. It's a little snippet from a Python code review. And it's this conversation between a developer, Abhishek, and an AI assistant that starts to make all this abstract philosophy feel a whole lot more real.
So what we're looking at here is the actual architecture of a blockchain system. This is not a drill, it's not a theory anymore. This is a blueprint. You can see the code for initializing the chain, handling pending transactions, even an encryption key. Somebody is actually building this thing.
And when you dig into the discussion around the code, its purpose gets really clear. This is not another crypto coin. Nope, it's a high-security platform for managing user identities. It's using a blockchain to make sure the data is solid, and it's got a proof-of-work system, a complex puzzle, to stop anyone from messing with it.
And this function right here, user access, this is where it all clicks. Remember how the white paper said a transaction is an active intent? Well, look at this. A simple login attempt is being treated exactly like that. It's not just random data. It's an intentional request for trust. The philosophy is literally being turned into a function.
Okay, so let's recap. We've got the theory from the white paper. We've got the blueprint from the code. But is this thing just an idea sitting on some developer's laptop? Or is it actually out there? Like, for real? Is there any proof that it exists in the wild? And that brings us to our third and final clue. And this one comes from a very public place: internet domain records. We're going to look at the digital breadcrumbs for a domain called preferido.us to see if this project has left any tracks.
So the public records show a really interesting change in how this domain was set up. On June 23, 2025, it looked pretty normal, standard internet stuff. But then, fast forward just 2 weeks to July 6th, and bam, something new and really important shows up. So, what was it?
And here it is. This is the smoking gun. They added an ENS record. ENS, that's the Ethereum name service, and it basically works like a bridge. It lets you take a regular old web domain, like profrito.us, and publicly link it forever to a specific address on the Ethereum blockchain. This is it. This is the proof. The project isn't just an idea anymore. It is officially on-chain.
Okay, so now let's put it all together. What happens when we lay out all three of our clues? You've got the philosophy from that white paper, the code from Abhishek's review, and the public footprint from the domain records. What's the picture that starts to emerge?
When you put it all together, it becomes crystal clear. The philosophy from the white paper, that's the vision. The code, that's the blueprint for a real, secure identity platform. The domain footprint, that shows it's been deployed and linked directly to Ethereum. And the final piece of the puzzle, the undeniable link, the domain records show a subdomain with the name of our developer, Abhishek. We are literally watching a project go from a wild, radical idea to a real-world thing.
And this is clearly just the beginning. The original white paper kind of leaves us on a cliffhanger, teasing what's next with these crazy ideas like emotional consensus protocols and memory-aware smart contracts. So think about it. This isn't just about building a new login system. We could be looking at the very beginning of systems that aren't just intelligent, but in their own weird way, empathetic. I mean, what would an internet built on that even look like?